Welcome to A Moment in Time with Nex. Today we're reviewing this book, Surrounded by Idiots by Thomas Erikson. And it's basically a book about the DISC personality profile, so DISC, and each color here is connected to one of the letters. So D is red, I is yellow, S is green, and blue is C. And those letters stand for dominant, D, or here, I'll keep the visual here. So dominant, inspiring, steady and stable, and compliant or conscientious is another word I like to use for it. And that's the general vibe of each of these four personality types. Now, everyone is a mix. Most people are a mix of at least two or three of these. This author in particular claims that nobody is all four. I imagine personality is a bit more nuanced than that, and that we all probably identify with bits of all of these, but you can take free online tests to see what your DISC personality profile is, or just by reading this book or even watching this review, you might get a feel for what you think you are. And depending on your level of self-awareness, you may not need to take any kind of test to know pretty much where you fall in these categories. So I do think it's really valuable to learn about your personality and to learn about personality types for a lot of reasons. But right now I'm reading this other book called Loneliness, and I'm almost done with this one, so I'll have a review for this one coming up soon. But this is just reminding me of the dangers of loneliness and social isolation and social ostracism, to the point where it's like reminding me why it's valuable to learn about people and spend time learning about personality types and how to interact with different kinds of people, learning about yourself so you know how to describe yourself to others, and you know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and you can kind of work on that and look for people in your life who are different and can balance you out and also teach you other ways of being. And you may have noticed the title, Surrounded by Idiots. It's kind of clickbaity. The idea is that sometimes when people are different from us and they have different values and different behaviors, we can think that they're idiots. We can think that because they're different. So the whole purpose of that title, not just to get eyeballs, is to like remind us that we're not surrounded by idiots, we're just surrounded by mostly people who are different than us. And that's why when you find people who are like you, you're like, oh, this person gets it. But it's just that they're more like you. It's not that they're more correct or right. They're just, you just resonate a little bit more with them because you're similar to them, so you understand them a little bit more easily. But it's really important to understand everyone else as much as we can, so that we can work on having social connections and not being lonely, and in keeping our network alive, strong, and growing. So right on the front cover, he has a breakdown of each color, and also the kind of like spectrums that they fall on. So I'll just quickly read down each of these to give you an idea of what each color represents, and maybe you can get some insight into what color you think you are, or what colors you think you are. For instance, I'm mostly yellow, with then second would be blue, but I'm much more yellow than I am anything else, and then next is blue, and I'm like the least green. Okay, so red is aggressive, ambitious, strong-willed, goal-oriented, and you'll see that he's alternating things that could be considered criticisms, where people are like, they have this perspective of people are idiots, or they just have this like negative take or skew on someone. And then you can see how they can also be strengths, and you can kind of see like both sides of the coin, and that's, you'll notice that with each color that it kind of alternates here. Pushing, problem solver, pioneer, decisive, innovator, impatient, controlling, convincing, performance-oriented, powerful, results-oriented, initiator, speed, timekeeper, intense, opinionated. I don't know why I said that like that. Opinionated, straightforward, and independent. Yellow, and that was red. Okay. Yellow is talkative, enthusiastic, persuasive, creative, optimistic, social, spontaneous, expressive, charming, full of vitality. I feel like he just needed enough to match the same number on each of these lists, so some of them are just like repeats and kind of redundant fillers. Full of vitality. All right. Self-centered, sensitive, adaptable, inspiring, needs attention, encouraging, communicative, flexible, open, sociable, imaginative, and easygoing. For green, we have patient, relaxed, self-controlled, reliable, composed, loyal, modest, understanding, lengthy, stable, prudent, discreet, supportive, good listener. Of all four colors, greens are the best listeners. Helpful, producer, persistent, reluctant. So greens resist change because they're more about like steady, stable kind of consistent. So when things are changing, greens can be most resistant to that. Thoughtful, conceals feelings. So someone who tends to internalize could be green. Considerate and kind. Another thing, I know I'm like saying a lot of sidebars about green, but green is the most common personality. And I also consider this to be kind of like the people pleaser type, people who put like family before everything else, people who are self-sacrificial for the group. That's the most common personality type in the population, according to this book. So I think it's probably the most useful to learn about for everyone, whether you're a green or not. It's good to know about how greens operate and kind of where they're coming from so that you can treat them well. A lot of times when people are quiet or they kind of just go with the flow, you might assume that they're dumb, they don't have, they're not capable of thinking for themselves. It's this idea of being surrounded by idiots. Reds and yellows, especially reds, are most likely to feel that way and characterize being around people that are different than them as that energy. But greens just, they don't feel the need to put their opinion forward. It doesn't mean they don't have one. It doesn't mean they're not having thoughts. Doesn't, just because they're quiet doesn't mean that, what's the saying? It's like, it's better to stay quiet and appear dumb than to open your mouth and reveal it. The more chatting and chattering you're doing, the more likely you are to make yourself look like a fool, where the quiet person usually is like gonna be coming off much better than that. So greens are also one of the most popular colors as well. The most well-liked. All right, so blue. Conscientious, systematic, distant. So like they're not as like relationship focused. Yellows and greens are more relationship oriented, where reds and blues are more task oriented and issue oriented. Correct. So blues are the types who really care about being right. Like sometimes they lose sight of the value of a relationship and the importance of a relationship because they're so concerned with being right or figuring out the truth. It's not necessarily ego driven. Ego is more like reds and yellows. They're also more likely to be extroverted, where greens and blues are more likely to be introverted. And again, kind of like more slow moving, whereas we heard the term we heard the term speed under red, they're fast moving. We also heard impatient. So they're going to be moving quicker. Blues are going to be the slowest, most methodical, making sure every box is checked. Conventional. Seems insecure. This could be like a kind of like a neurotic energy, like they have to check and double check and triple check. They have to have a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So they could seem kind of anxious, nervous kind of energy could be associated with blue. Objective, structured, analytical, perfectionist, needs time, reflecting, methodical, seeks facts, quality-oriented, scrutinizers, follows rules, logical, questioning, meticulous, and reserved. So they also say that reds and yellows are more active and they're more like implementers, where blues and greens are more passive and reserved. And let me just show you the little quadrant here, because this is how you can kind of get an idea of who's going to get along with who. So if they're next to each other, they can kind of get along over these shared values. I don't have my autofocus on, so I'm not sure how clear you can see that. But even just looking at where they are in the quadrants, opposites like red and green, yellow and blue, they're opposites of each other, so they're more likely to not understand each other. They're going to have a lot more differences and be a lot more polar from each other. But that doesn't mean anything bad. It's just important to be aware of these things so that we can navigate these kinds of relationships that we will find ourselves in, even relationships with self. Like I'm yellow and then blue, and those are opposites, so there could be even some conflicts or even maybe lack of consistency in my personality because of these different parts of myself that can come up in various situations. And so being aware of all the different parts that make you unique and make you you is valuable, because you can explain these things to friends, to partners, to family members. You can be like, oh, sorry, I talk a lot. Sometimes I don't know when to stop talking. I recently, that's me as a yellow. I mean, I have a whole podcast called NexTalks. I'm very yellow. I'm very talkative. So I recently told my partner, who's a green, that if we're out somewhere and I'm doing the motor mouthing and I'm just talking way too much, to put his hand on my leg as a subtle nonverbal cue and kind of reminder and a grounding act that brings me back into my body to kind of just, okay, wrap it up, let other people talk. He hasn't done it yet because, again, he's a green, so he's like kind of down to just go along with maybe what I'm saying, and isn't as aware maybe that other people might want to talk because greens are such good listeners. So, but knowing myself as a yellow, I can practice things like counting to 3 silently after someone finishes speaking before I start speaking, checking in with how many people are in this conversation, who hasn't gotten a chance to talk, prompt them, try to get other people talking, focus on them, not about you saying what you think and what you know, which is something that I have a tendency toward. But now that I know, I have awareness around it, so I'm on the lookout for it, and I'm trying to implement things to balance that and help me to connect with colors, all the colors of the rainbow. The last thing I want to say is that social skills, like any skills, will weaken if you don't use them over time. So make sure that you're getting out there, getting surrounded by idiots, just to find out they're not idiots after all. And you can practice using these different ideas and techniques with people. I do recommend this book too. If you like to read or you want to do an audiobook, there's a lot of nuance and specifics I didn't get into in this review, but I did find value from this. And even just looking into the DISC personality profile, DISC, you can start to see, okay, who do I know who's these different colors or letters, and what does that mean about them? What does that mean about their values, and how can I interact with them? Enjoy! This has been A Moment in Time with Nex. Expreme medium, squeeze the day.